The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office. My mother's voice cut through the speaker with that familiar edge of disappointment I'd grown up hearing. "Jenna, your father's 70th birthday is next week, and we're having dinner at Rosewood Manor. I know money's tight for you right now, so don't worry about contributing. Your brother Kyle is handling the arrangements." I set down my coffee cup harder than I intended, the ceramic clinking against the mahogany desk. Money's tight? I owned 3 successful marketing agencies across the West Coast, had just closed a 7-figure deal with a tech startup, and my investment portfolio was thriving. But somehow, in my mother's eyes, I was still the struggling 22-year-old who dropped out of business school to chase what she called pipe dreams. "Mom, I can afford." "Jenna, please. We both know how these ventures of yours go. Remember the catering business? The online boutique? Kyle has a stable job at the bank. He can handle this properly." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my chest tight with a familiar cocktail of anger and hurt. 31 years old, and she still spoke to me like I was an irresponsible child playing dress-up in the business world. If you've ever been dismissed by someone who's supposed to believe in you most, you know that particular sting. It's not just rejection. It's the crushing weight of being invisible to the people who shaped your entire understanding of worth. But here's what my mother didn't know, what none of my family knew. 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased Rosewood Manor. Not as an investment property, not as a business acquisition, but as a gift to myself. A reminder that the girl they'd written off had built something real. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same restaurant where my brother was planning to celebrate our father's milestone birthday, the place my mother deemed too expensive for someone like me to contribute to, bore my name on the deed. Every month, the profits from that establishment flowed directly into my personal account. I discovered Rosewood Manor during one of my weekend drives through Carmel Valley, a ritual I'd started after particularly brutal family gatherings. The restaurant sat on a hill overlooking vineyard-covered slopes, its mission-style architecture and warm lighting creating an atmosphere that felt both elegant and welcoming. When I learned it was struggling financially, something clicked. Maybe it was the way the elderly owner, Vincent Rosewood, reminded me of my grandfather. Maybe it was the desperate hope in his eyes when he talked about preserving his family's legacy. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, it was the knowledge that someday my family would eat there, never knowing that their failure daughter owned every fork they used. The purchase had been handled through my attorney, with ownership buried under layers of LLCs and trust structures. I'd kept Vincent on as general manager, told him to run it exactly as he always had, but with the financial backing he needed to make it truly spectacular. The staff knew me only as Ms. Chen, the investor who occasionally stopped by to check on operations. They had no idea I was Vincent's boss, and I preferred it that way. But now, as I sat in my office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, my mother's words echoing in my mind, a different kind of plan was forming. I pulled on my contacts and dialed Vincent's direct line. "Vincent, it's Jenna Chen. I need you to do me a favor." "Of course, Miss Chen. What can I do for you?" "I'm going to be dining at the restaurant next Tuesday evening with my family. It's my father's birthday celebration. I want you to treat it like any other reservation, but..." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "When we arrive, I need you to personally greet our party. And I need you to address me as the owner." There was silence on the other end. Vincent had known me for 6 months, had seen me pour my heart and considerable resources into revitalizing his restaurant, but we'd maintained the professional distance I'd insisted upon. "Miss Chen, are you sure? This sounds like it might be complicated." "Vincent, do you trust me?" "With my life, miss. You saved this place. You saved my family's legacy. Then trust me on this."
"And Vincent?"
"Make sure the evening is perfect. Spare no expense. I want them to understand exactly what kind of establishment they're dining in." After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The plan was audacious, maybe even cruel. But 31 years of being underestimated, of having my achievements dismissed, of being treated like the family disappointment while my younger brother was celebrated for his mediocrity, it had built up like sediment in my chest, layer upon layer of resentment I'd tried to ignore. Kyle worked as a loan officer at a regional bank. He made decent money, lived in a nice suburban house with his wife and 2 kids, drove a sensible sedan. He was exactly what our parents wanted in a child: predictable, safe, conventional. When he'd graduated from college with his finance degree, they'd thrown him a party. When I dropped out to start my first business, they'd staged what felt like an intervention. "Jenna, be realistic," my father had said, his voice gentle but firm. "Business is tough. Maybe you should finish school first, get a backup plan." My mother had been less diplomatic. "This is just another one of your phases. Remember when you wanted to be a marine biologist? Then a photographer? You never stick with anything." They weren't entirely wrong. I had changed my mind frequently as a teenager, cycling through different dreams and passions. But what they never understood was that each pivot taught me something new, built skills I didn't even know I was developing. The photography hobby gave me an eye for visual marketing. The marine biology obsession taught me research methods and analytical thinking. The various part-time jobs throughout high school, from waitressing to retail to tutoring, showed me how businesses really operated from the ground up. But to them, I was flighty, unreliable, someone who started things but never finished them. So when my first business failed, they weren't surprised. When the second one struggled, they exchanged knowing looks. It was Kyle who'd gotten the family loan when he'd needed a down payment for his house. Kyle who'd been asked to give the toast at their anniversary dinner. Kyle who'd somehow become the family's financial advisor, despite the fact that my net worth dwarfed his by a factor of 10. They had no idea about the agencies, the investments, the real estate portfolio. I'd learned early not to share my successes with them. Every triumph was met with warnings about how quickly things could fall apart. Every victory was diminished by reminders of past failures. Eventually, I'd stopped trying to prove myself to them. But Rosewood Manor was different. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was about the delicious moment of revelation, about watching their faces when they realized that their struggling daughter owned the very place they deemed too expensive for her to afford. I spent the rest of the week planning every detail. I researched the menu, made sure Vincent understood exactly how the evening should unfold, and arranged for special touches that would make the night memorable for my father while creating the perfect setup for my reveal. The restaurant's head chef, Maria, was excited about creating a custom tasting menu for the birthday celebration. She'd been with Rosewood Manor for 8 years, had watched it decline under the previous financial struggles, and had flourished under my ownership. When I purchased the restaurant, I'd given her free rein to elevate the cuisine, upgrade the kitchen equipment, and source from the best local suppliers. Her gratitude was genuine, and her loyalty absolute. "Miss Chun," she said during our planning call, "your father is going to have an unforgettable evening. I promise you that." "Maria, make sure there are subtle signs throughout the meal that this isn't just any restaurant. I want them to understand they're experiencing something special." "Leave it to me. By the end of the evening, they'll know they've dined somewhere extraordinary." But even as I planned and schemed, a small voice in the back of my mind questioned what I was doing. Was this revenge? Justice? Or was I just a successful businesswoman who'd never outgrown the need for her parents' approval? The truth was probably all three. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical for October in Northern California. I chose my outfit carefully: a tailored black blazer over dark jeans, designer boots, and a watch that had cost more than Kyle made in 2 months. Understated, but unmistakably expensive to anyone who knew quality when they saw it. The drive to Carmel Valley gave me time to rehearse the evening in my mind, to imagine every possible scenario. Would my mother be embarrassed? Angry? Would my father be proud? Or would he be disappointed that I'd kept something so significant from them? And Kyle? How would Kyle react to learning that his irresponsible older sister owned a piece of the world he'd never even dream of touching? As I pulled into Rosewood Manor's circular driveway at exactly 6:30, my hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The restaurant looked perfect, its mission-style facade glowing warmly in the early evening light. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms waited to take cars, and I could see my family's vehicles already parked. My parents' aging Mercedes, Kyle's practical Honda Accord. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the large windows as other diners enjoyed their meals in the soft amber light. In 6 months of ownership, I'd never actually dined here with other people. Every visit had been business-focused, solitary, purposeful. Tonight would be my first time experiencing the restaurant as both owner and guest. Vincent appeared at my car window, impeccable in his charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He opened my door with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades in hospitality. "Miss Chun, your family has already been seated. They're at the vineyard table, just as you requested." The vineyard table was the restaurant's crown jewel, positioned perfectly to catch both the sunset view and the intimate ambience of the main dining room. I'd specifically chosen it for tonight, knowing it would underscore the specialness of the occasion while positioning us exactly where I needed us to be for maximum impact. "Vincent, remember what we discussed. Let the evening unfold naturally, but when the moment feels right." "I understand completely, Miss Chun. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the entrance of my own restaurant, toward the family gathering where I was about to turn everyone's assumptions upside down. Walking through the entrance of Rosewood Manor, I was struck by how different the space felt when you knew every detail of its operation. The hostess, Sarah, smiled warmly. She'd been here when I bought the place and had watched the transformation from the inside. Her uniform was new, part of the upgraded aesthetic I'd implemented, but her genuine hospitality had always been her strength. "Good evening, miss," she began, then caught herself. "We'd discussed this. Tonight, I wasn't the owner. I was just another guest." "Good evening. I'm here for the Peterson party." "Of course. Right this way." As we walked through the dining room, I noticed details I'd overseen but never experienced as a guest. The soft jazz playing through the carefully positioned speakers. The way candlelight caught the newly refinished hardwood floors. The subtle scent of rosemary and wine that had become the restaurant's signature atmosphere. Every element had been my choice, my investment, my vision made real. Then I saw them. My family was seated at the vineyard table, exactly as I'd requested. My father, David, looked distinguished in his navy blazer, his silver beard neatly trimmed for the occasion. At 70, he still carried himself with the quiet authority that had made him successful in his engineering career. My mother, Patricia, sat beside him in what I recognized as her special occasion outfit, a wine-colored dress she'd worn to every important family event for the past 5 years. Her auburn hair was styled in the same conservative cut she'd maintained since I was a teenager. And Kyle. My younger brother had inherited our father's tall frame, but lacked his presence. At 28, he already showed signs of the soft living that came with a desk job and suburban comfort. His wife, Amanda, sat beside him, scrolling through her phone while absently stirring a cocktail. The scene was so perfectly ordinary, so utterly typical of every family gathering we'd ever had. But tonight, the ordinary was about to become extraordinary. "Jenna." My father's face lit up as he spotted me approaching. He stood to give me his customary bear hug, and for a moment, I felt the familiar warmth of his unconditional love. Whatever else happened tonight, my father had never made me feel small or unworthy. His disappointment in my career choices had always felt protective rather than dismissive. "Happy birthday, Dad. 70 looks good on you." You're just saying that because you have to." His eyes crinkled with genuine affection. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. That's a sharp outfit." My mother's greeting was cooler, though she made the effort to smile. "Jenna, I'm glad you could make it. Traffic wasn't too bad from the city." "Not at all. Actually, I've been in the area quite a bit lately. Work stuff." Kyle looked up from the wine list he'd been studying with the intensity of someone trying to appear knowledgeable. "Work stuff in Carmel Valley? I thought your businesses were all in San Francisco." "Business takes you all kinds of places." I settled into the chair Vincent had positioned perfectly for me, facing the room, back to the wall, where I could see everything unfold. The next few minutes passed in typical family small talk. Kyle updated us on his latest promotion prospects. Amanda showed photos of their recent weekend in Lake Tahoe. My mother shared neighborhood gossip. I found myself only half listening, distracted by the broader orchestration happening around us. Our server approached. James, a young man I'd personally hired after he'd impressed me during his interview with his knowledge of wine and genuine passion for hospitality. He carried himself with a confidence I'd encouraged in all our staff, the kind of service that made guests feel special without being ostentatious. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rosewood Manor. I'm James, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. His eyes lingered on me for just a moment longer than the others. Recognition, but professional discretion. We're honored to host such a special celebration. I understand we're celebrating a milestone birthday. 70 years young, my father said with a grin. Though my kids might argue with the young part. Well, we're going to make sure it's a birthday to remember. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that our owner has arranged something special for your table tonight. We'll be serving a chef's tasting menu featuring some of our signature dishes, paired with wines from our reserve collection. I watched my family's faces carefully. Kyle's eyebrows rose. He knew enough about restaurant pricing to understand that a chef's tasting menu at a place like this would cost more than he typically spent on groceries in a month. My mother's smile became slightly strained, the look she got when she was calculating expenses. "Oh, that sounds wonderful," she said, "but we didn't order." "It's complimentary for tonight's celebration," James explained smoothly. "The owner wants to ensure your father has a truly memorable birthday experience." There was a moment of confused silence. Kyle was the first to speak. "The owner? Why would the owner do that?" James glanced at me almost imperceptibly before responding. "Well, I believe there's a connection to your party, but perhaps it would be better if I let the details unfold as the evening progresses." And there it was, the first seed of curiosity planted. I could see the questions forming in their minds, the slight shift in the energy at the table. Kyle was still focused on the financial implications, already calculating how much money they were saving. My mother was trying to figure out the angle, her trained skepticism working overtime. But my father just looked pleased, the kind of man who accepted generosity gracefully without needing to dissect it. "Well, that's very kind," he said. "Please tell the owner we appreciate the gesture." James smiled and began describing the first course, but I could see my family was only partially listening now. The mystery of the owner's generosity had captured their attention, created the exact dynamic I'd been hoping for. As James left to place our order, Kyle leaned forward. "Do you know anything about this place, Jenna? You said you've been in the area for work." "I know it's supposed to be excellent. Very exclusive." I kept my tone casual, but I could feel the anticipation building in my chest. "The food is supposed to be incredible." "Exclusive means expensive," my mother muttered. "I hope this doesn't create any expectations that we'll be paying for meals like this regularly." "Patricia," my father said gently, "let's just enjoy the evening." But my mother was just getting started. "I'm being practical, David. You know how Jenna can be about restaurants. Remember that phase when she wanted to open that catering company? She spent weeks dragging us to fancy places, talking about inspiration and market research. We can't afford to make this a regular thing." The familiar heat rose in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was exactly why tonight mattered. Every dismissal, every assumption, every casual reference to my supposed financial limitations, it all contributed to the moment that was coming. "Don't worry, Mom. I think we can handle one nice dinner." Kyle laughed, not unkindly, but with the casual condescension that had become our default dynamic. "Easy there, big shot. This place probably costs more per plate than you make in a week." "Kyle," Amanda said, finally looking up from her phone, "don't be mean." "I'm not being mean. I'm being realistic. Look around." He gestured at the dining room, the elegantly dressed patrons, the obvious markers of upscale establishment. "This isn't TGI Fridays. The wine list alone probably starts at $50 a bottle." He wasn't wrong about the pricing. I'd approved every item on that wine list, had worked with our sommelier to create a collection that ranged from accessible to extraordinary. But what Kyle didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that cost was relative. What seemed impossibly expensive to him was pocket change to me. James returned with our first course, a delicate amuse-bouche featuring local abalone with Meyer lemon foam. The presentation was artistic, the kind of food photography that food bloggers would kill for. More importantly, it was delicious. Maria had outdone herself. "This is incredible," my father said after his first bite. "I've never tasted anything like this." "It's definitely fancy," Kyle admitted, though he seemed almost uncomfortable with how much he was enjoying it. As we ate, I found myself watching them experience the restaurant through fresh eyes. The attention to detail they were noticing, the weight of the silverware, the quality of the glassware, the seamless service, all of it was the result of decisions I'd made, standards I'd implemented. They were praising my vision without knowing it, appreciating my investment without realizing it. But the real moment was still coming. Vincent appeared tableside as James cleared our first-course plates. He moved with the practiced elegance of a man who'd spent decades in fine dining, his presence commanding without being intrusive. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Vincent Rosewood, the general manager here. I wanted to personally check on your dining experience and wish a very happy birthday to Mr. Peterson." My father beamed. "Thank you, Vincent. This has been extraordinary so far." "I'm so pleased to hear that. We take great pride in providing memorable experiences for our guests." Vincent's eyes met mine briefly, and I could see the question there. Was I ready?
"Not yet."
"Let it build a little more." "Vincent," my mother said, "we were wondering about the owner's generous gift tonight. It's very unexpected." "Ah, yes. Well, the owner has a special interest in ensuring tonight is perfect." Vincent's smile was warm but mysterious. "She has very particular standards for hospitality, and she felt your celebration deserved our finest attention."
"She."
Not he. Another small detail, another piece of the puzzle I was laying out for them. "She must be very successful to own a place like this," Kyle said, and I could hear the slight envy in his voice. "What kind of business background does she have?" "Oh, quite impressive actually. Multiple businesses, I understand. Very sharp, very strategic. The kind of person who sees opportunities others miss." Vincent was enjoying this, I could tell. "She has excellent instincts for investment and a real vision for what makes an establishment special." As Vincent left our table, I caught Kyle exchanging a look with Amanda. My mother was staring thoughtfully at her wine glass. My father was simply happy, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling around the table. The second course arrived, pan-seared halibut with truffle risotto and microgreens. The portions were perfect, the plating restaurant magazine worthy. As we ate, the conversation naturally drifted to business and success, spurred by Vincent's description of the mysterious female owner. "I just can't imagine what it must be like to own a place like this," Amanda said. "The pressure, the responsibility, the money it must take to keep it running." "It's all about leverage," Kyle said, sliding into his finance professional voice. "You need significant capital, excellent credit, probably multiple investors. It's not the kind of thing someone just decides to do on a whim." "Unlike my businesses," was the unspoken implication. "Unlike my phases and ventures and pipe dreams." "I think it takes more than money," I said carefully. "It takes vision, the ability to see what something could become, not just what it is." My mother looked at me sharply. "That sounds like something you'd say. Always talking about vision and potential instead of practical considerations like cash flow and market analysis." "Maybe," I said, taking a sip of the excellent Pinot Noir James had paired with our course. "But sometimes vision pays off." The conversation continued, but I could feel the anticipation building in my chest like pressure in a tea kettle.
Soon.
Very soon, everything was going to change. The third course was where Maria truly began to show off. She'd prepared my father's favorite, duck confit with cherry gastrique, but elevated it to an art form. The meat fell off the bone. The sauce was a perfect balance of sweet and tart, and the accompanying roasted vegetables looked like they belonged in a still-life painting. But more than the food, I was watching the subtle transformation happening at our table. My family was beginning to relax into the luxury of the experience, to accept that somehow, inexplicably, they deserved this level of treatment. Kyle had stopped checking his phone. Amanda was actually engaging in conversation instead of scrolling through social media. Even my mother had started to soften, her usual worry lines smoothing as the excellent wine worked its magic. "I have to admit," she said, cutting into her duck with obvious pleasure, "this is exceptional. I can't remember the last time I had a meal this good." "It's our anniversary dinner at Chez Laurent," my father reminded her. "But that was, what, 10 years ago?" 12, Kyle corrected. "I remember because I was still in college and you guys came back raving about it for weeks." The mention of Chez Laurent sparked a memory. I'd taken a client there just last month, a tech executive whose account was worth $500,000 in annual billing. The meal had been good but not exceptional, the service professional but impersonal. Nothing like what we were experiencing tonight at my restaurant. My restaurant. Even thinking the words gave me a thrill of ownership that I'd been suppressing all evening. James appeared with perfectly timed precision to refill our wine glasses and present the next course. "This is our signature preparation, locally sourced lamb with rosemary garlic reduction, paired with our house-made gnocchi and seasonal vegetables." The presentation was stunning, but what caught my attention was the subtle pride in James's voice when he said, "Our signature preparation." In the 6 months I'd owned Rosewood Manor, I'd worked to build exactly this kind of staff loyalty, this sense of ownership and pride in their work. Every employee, from the kitchen staff to the servers to the hostesses, knew they were part of something special, something that valued excellence over profit margins. "James," my father said, "please give our compliments to the chef. This is restaurant-quality food." James smiled. "I'll be sure to tell Maria. She'll be thrilled. She's been with Rosewood Manor for 8 years and has really come into her own since our new ownership took over." There was that word again. Ownership. I could see it registering with Kyle, the way his analytical mind was trying to piece together the timeline and the implications. "When did the ownership change?" he asked. "About 6 months ago. Complete transformation of the place. New equipment, upgraded ingredients, better wine selection. The owner really invested in making this a destination restaurant." "Smart business move," Kyle said, though I could hear the slight edge in his voice. "Takes significant capital to do that kind of renovation." "Oh yes, substantial investment. But the owner had the vision to see what this place could become. Sometimes you need someone with real business acumen to unlock potential." As James moved away from our table, I watched Kyle process this information. 6 months ago was when I'd closed my biggest deal of the year, when my financial advisor had suggested diversifying into real estate and hospitality. 6 months ago was when I'd started making mysterious weekend trips to Carmel Valley. But Kyle couldn't make that connection because in his mind, I was still the flighty older sister who couldn't stick with anything long enough to make it profitable. The lamb was perfect, tender, flavorful, with just enough pink in the center. As we ate, the conversation naturally turned to success and business ventures, prompted by the restaurant's obvious prosperity. "I wonder what the owner's background is," Amanda mused. "You don't just wake up one day and decide to buy a restaurant. There has to be serious money behind it. Probably inherited," my mother said dismissively. "Or married into it. That's usually how women end up owning businesses like this." The comment hit exactly as she'd intended, a not-so-subtle jab at my own entrepreneurial efforts. In my mother's worldview, successful businesswomen were either born into money or married into it. The possibility that someone might build wealth through skill, strategy, and sheer determination was apparently too radical to consider. "Maybe she built it herself," I suggested quietly.
Kyle laughed.
"Come on, Jenna. Do you know how much capital it takes to acquire and renovate a place like this? We're talking millions. Nobody just builds up that kind of money from scratch, especially not quickly enough to be making moves like this at our age." Our age. Kyle was 28, I was 31. In his mind, we were both too young to have accumulated serious wealth. He couldn't imagine that while he'd been climbing the corporate ladder one predictable rung at a time, I'd been building an empire. "Besides," Amanda added, "women don't usually go into hospitality as owners. It's too risky, too demanding. Most of the successful restaurant owners I know are men." I took a slow sip of wine, savoring both the complex flavors and the delicious irony of the moment. Here they were, enjoying the fruits of my success, while simultaneously explaining why someone like me could never achieve it. What if, I said carefully, the owner was someone unexpected, someone who'd been underestimated? My father, bless him, looked intrigued. What do you mean? I mean, what if everyone assumed she couldn't do it, couldn't build something this successful, and then she did it anyway? That's a nice story, honey, my mother said with a patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being naive. But business doesn't work on sentiment. It works on capital, connections, and experience. You can't just wish your way into owning something like this. The dismissal stung, as it always did, but tonight it carried a special irony. She was sitting in my restaurant, eating food prepared in my kitchen, served by my employees, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my success, and still explaining why someone like me could never achieve what I'd already done. Vincent reappeared as we finished the lamb course, moving between tables with practiced ease before settling beside ours with the familiarity of someone checking on VIP guests. How is everything progressing? Are you enjoying the menu Maria prepared? Incredible, my father said immediately. Please give our compliments to the chef. And to the owner, of course, for such generous hospitality. I'll be sure to pass that along. The owner will be pleased to hear you're enjoying the evening. Vincent's smile was warm as his eyes met mine. She has very high standards for guest satisfaction. We were just discussing her, Kyle said, leaning forward with curiosity. It's impressive what she's accomplished here. She must have incredible business sense. Oh, remarkable business sense. Strategic thinking, excellent instincts for investment opportunities. She saw potential here that others had missed, had the vision to see what this place could become with the right attention and resources. My mother was listening intently now, her expression thoughtful. And she did all this herself? The acquisition, the renovation, the business plan? Completely herself. Well, she had advisors, of course, lawyers and consultants, but the vision and the financial commitment were entirely her own. She's built quite an impressive portfolio of businesses over the years. Portfolio. Kyle's interest was clearly piqued. What kind of businesses? Oh, I shouldn't speak too specifically about her private affairs, Vincent said with professional discretion, but I understand she owns several companies, primarily in marketing and consulting. Very successful, by all accounts. Marketing and consulting. I watched Kyle's face as he processed this information, saw the moment when something clicked. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. But before he could say anything, Vincent continued. In fact, I believe she's dining with us tonight. Perhaps I'll have the opportunity to introduce her to you later in the evening. The silence that fell over our table was profound. Amanda stopped mid-chew. My mother's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Kyle's fork remained suspended above his plate. She's here? My father asked, looking around the dining room with obvious curiosity. Which table? Vincent smiled mysteriously. Oh, I think the introduction will happen naturally. These things have a way of working out perfectly. As he walked away, I could feel the energy at our table shift completely. The relaxed family dinner had suddenly become something else entirely, an event with hidden layers and unexpected possibilities. Holy shit, Kyle whispered, then quickly glanced around to make sure no one had heard him swear in such an upscale establishment. Kyle, Amanda hissed. No, think about it. We're getting this incredible meal, this special treatment, and now we find out the owner is actually here? What are the odds? What are the odds, indeed? If only he knew. My mother was looking around the dining room with new eyes, trying to identify which of the other patrons might be the mysterious female entrepreneur who'd created this evening's magic. I watched her gaze move from table to table, dismissing the young couples, the elderly pairs, the business associates sharing drinks. It has to be someone our age, she murmured, someone who could have built multiple businesses already. Or someone older who looks young, Amanda suggested. Successful people take care of themselves. They were profiling the owner, creating an image of who she must be based on their assumptions about success, wealth, and female entrepreneurship. I wondered if I would pass their test, if the daughter they dismissed would match their newly formed expectations of a successful businesswoman. The fourth course arrived, a palate-cleansing sorbet infused with champagne and herbs from the restaurant's own garden. It was a perfect interlude, light and refreshing, designed to prepare our taste buds for the final courses. But more than cleansing our palates, it was cleansing the air of our previous conversation patterns. My family was no longer discussing my supposed financial limitations or Kyle's superior business acumen. Instead, they were speculating about success, about vision, about the kind of person who could create something as elegant and profitable as Rosewood Manor. They had no idea they were describing me. James refilled our champagne flutes. Yes, we'd moved on to champagne, another upgrade I'd specifically requested for the evening, and mentioned that we were approaching the final courses. "I hope you've saved room," he said with a grin. "The dessert course is something special, and we have a surprise coming with a coffee service."
A surprise.
I felt a flutter of anticipation in my chest, knowing that the evening's revelations were building toward their crescendo. Soon, very soon, the family dinner would become something none of us would ever forget. But first, I was going to savor these final moments of anonymity, these last minutes of being their struggling daughter instead of the successful entrepreneur who'd been hiding in plain sight. The champagne bubbles danced on my tongue, and I smiled. The fifth course was Maria's masterpiece, beef tenderloin with truffle butter, accompanied by roasted root vegetables and a red wine reduction that had been simmering for hours. But what made it special wasn't just the preparation, it was the cut of meat itself. I'd specifically sourced Wagyu beef for tonight, the kind of ingredient that cost more per pound than Kyle made in a day. As my family savored each bite, their expressions of amazement becoming more pronounced with every course, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years ago, I'd been sitting in a different restaurant, a chain steakhouse where Kyle had chosen to celebrate his promotion to senior loan officer. The entire family had gathered to toast his success, and I'd watched from the sidelines as he basked in their approval. "Kyle's really going places," my mother had said that night, her voice filled with the kind of pride I'd been chasing my entire life. "He's got such a good head for business, so practical and stable." I'd been running my second marketing agency at the time, the one that would eventually become the foundation of my current success. But that night, watching Kyle receive congratulations for what amounted to a middle management position while my six-figure business was dismissed as one of Jenna's projects, I'd made a promise to myself. Someday, I'd show them exactly what I was capable of. Now, as I watched my father close his eyes in bliss over the Wagyu beef, as I saw my mother actually smile with genuine pleasure for the first time all evening, I realized that someday had arrived. "This is incredible," Kyle said, cutting another piece of the tenderloin. "I mean, this is the kind of meal you read about in magazines. I had no idea places like this even existed outside of major cities." "The owner clearly has exquisite taste," Amanda added. "And the budget to match. This level of quality doesn't come cheap." They were right, of course. The ingredients alone for tonight's menu cost more than most restaurants spend on an entire week's worth of meals. But when you own the restaurant, when you're investing in your own vision rather than trying to maximize someone else's profits, those costs become investments in excellence. "I keep thinking about what Vincent said," my mother mused, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Multiple businesses, marketing and consulting. She sounds impressive." "Intimidating, more like," Kyle laughed. "Can you imagine having dinner with someone like that? What do you even talk about with a person who owns restaurants and runs multiple companies?" "What do you talk about?" I thought. "The same things we've been talking about all evening: family, memories, dreams, frustrations. Success doesn't change who you are at your core, it just changes how other people see you." But listening to Kyle's comment, I realized something profound. He literally couldn't imagine having a conversation with someone like the woman I'd become. In his mind, successful entrepreneurs existed in a different realm, spoke a different language, lived lives so far removed from his experience that they might as well be aliens. The irony was breathtaking. He'd been having dinner with exactly that person his entire life, and he'd never noticed because his assumptions about me had made it impossible for him to see what was right in front of him. James appeared tableside with perfect timing, as he'd been doing all evening. "How is the beef?" "Meeting expectations." "Exceeding them," my father said warmly. Please tell the chef this is extraordinary. Maria will be thrilled to hear that. She's particularly proud of tonight's menu. She worked with the owner to design something special for your celebration. James's eyes flicked to me briefly. Speaking of which, the owner asked me to let you know she'll be stopping by your table shortly. The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. My family went completely still, forks suspended, conversations halted mid-sentence. She's coming here? Amanda whispered. To our table? Just to say hello and wish Mr. Peterson a happy birthday. She likes to personally meet guests who are celebrating special occasions. After James left, the silence stretched until my father finally spoke. Well, that's unexpected. Should we be nervous? Why would we be nervous, Dad? I asked, though I could feel my own heart racing. This was it. The moment I'd been planning, the revelation that would change everything. I don't know, he admitted. I guess I've never met anyone who owned a place like this. What's the protocol? Do we stand up? Shake hands? Kyle was frantically trying to smooth his hair and straighten his tie. Maybe we should have dressed better. I mean, look at us, we look like tourists. My mother was doing her own version of last-minute primping, checking her reflection in her phone's camera. I wish I'd known. I would have worn something more appropriate. Watching them transform from relaxed diners into nervous supplicants was both amusing and heartbreaking. These were the same people who'd spent 31 years treating me like I'd never amount to anything, and now they were practically panicking at the thought of meeting someone exactly like the person I'd become. Relax, I said, reaching for my champagne flute. I'm sure she's just a normal person. Normal people don't own restaurants like this, Jenna, Kyle said, his voice tight with anxiety. Normal people don't drop hundreds of thousands of dollars renovating dining rooms and upgrading wine cellars. She's probably incredibly sophisticated, probably went to Harvard or Stanford, probably has connections we can't even imagine. Actually, I dropped out of business school, learned everything through trial and error, and my most valuable connections were the clients I'd served so well they'd become advocates for my business. But Kyle's assumptions about success were so rigid, he couldn't conceive of any other path. What if she asks about our jobs? Amanda worried. What if she wants to know what we do? We tell her the truth, my father said firmly. Kyle works at the bank. I'm a retired engineer, Patricia volunteers at the library, and Jenna runs her marketing business. Marketing business. Even my father, who loved me unconditionally, couldn't bring himself to call it what it really was, a multi-million-dollar empire that employed 37 people across 3 offices. I was about to correct him when Vincent appeared at our table, moving with the measured pace of someone orchestrating a carefully planned moment. Good evening again. I hope you're continuing to enjoy your meal. Absolutely, my mother said quickly. Everything has been perfect. Wonderful. I wanted to let you know that the owner will be joining you momentarily. She's just finishing up some business with the kitchen staff, but she's very much looking forward to meeting you. We're honored, my father said, and I could see he genuinely meant it. Please tell her we appreciate everything she's done to make this evening special. Actually, Vincent said with a slight smile, I think she already knows. Before anyone could ask what he meant by that cryptic comment, he was walking away, leaving us alone with our anticipation and growing nervousness. This is surreal, Kyle muttered. 6 months ago, I'd never heard of this place, and now we're about to meet the owner personally. It's like being invited backstage at a concert or something. 6 months ago. There it was again, that timeline that should have been a clue if any of them had been paying attention. 6 months ago was when I'd started being vague about my weekend plans. 6 months ago was when I'd stopped talking about work challenges and started deflecting questions about my business with casual mentions of things going well. 6 months ago was when I'd transformed from struggling entrepreneur to restaurant owner, but my family had been too invested in their image of me to notice the change. The dessert course arrived before the owner did, an elaborate chocolate souffle with raspberry coulis and gold leaf garnish. It was Instagram-worthy, the kind of dessert that announced you were somewhere special. But more than its visual appeal, it was delicious, rich, complex, perfectly balanced. I don't think I can finish this, Amanda said after several bites. It's incredible, but I'm so full. I'm going to try, Kyle declared. When am I going to get another chance to eat food like this? Never, if he continued to think of his sister as a financial liability rather than a successful entrepreneur. But soon, very soon, that perception was going to change dramatically. I was savoring my own souffle, enjoying the moment of calm before the storm, when I noticed Vincent approaching our table one final time. But this time, he wasn't alone. This time, he was escorting me. No, that wasn't right. This time, he was preparing to introduce me. I felt a flutter of panic, then excitement, then something that might have been terror. For 6 months, I'd imagined this moment. I'd rehearsed different versions of the reveal, practiced various ways to handle their reactions. But now, with Vincent approaching and my family's expectations at their highest, I realized I had no idea how this was actually going to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vincent said, his voice carrying the formal tone of an official introduction, "I'd like you to meet the owner of Rosewood Manor." He paused, letting the moment build. "This is Ms. Jenna Chen." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just quiet, it was the absence of all sound, all movement, all thought. My family stared at me as if I'd just materialized out of thin air, as if the laws of physics had suddenly stopped making sense. My father's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, amazement, and finally, something that looked like pride mixed with shock. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without any sound emerging. Kyle looked like he'd been hit in the face with a brick. Amanda's spoon fell from her hand, clattering against her dessert plate with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Kyle started, then stopped. "You." My mother tried, then trailed off. Vincent stood beside our table, clearly enjoying the moment. "Ms. Chun purchased Rosewood Manor 6 months ago and has been instrumental in its transformation into the establishment you've experienced tonight." 6 months ago. The timeline finally clicked into place for Kyle. I could see it happening in real time, his analytical mind connecting dots he'd never thought to connect before. "You own this," he whispered. "I own this," I confirmed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "The renovation, the staff, the menu. All of this is yours?" "All of this is mine." My father was the first to truly respond. He stood up from his chair, walked around the table, and pulled me into the fiercest hug he'd given me since I was a little girl. "Jenna," he whispered in my ear, his voice thick with emotion. "My God, sweetheart. You did this. You actually did this." When he finally released me, there were tears in his eyes. But the rest of the family was still processing, still trying to reconcile the daughter and sister they thought they knew with the successful entrepreneur standing before them. The revelation had landed. Now came the real test: how they would handle the truth about who I'd become. The moments immediately following Vincent's introduction felt suspended in time, like that instant when you know you've said something that can't be taken back. I remained standing beside our table, watching my family process the fundamental shift in everything they thought they knew about me. My mother was the first to find her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Jenna, how is this possible?" "The same way anything is possible, Mom. Hard work, smart decisions, and a little bit of luck." Kyle was shaking his head slowly, like someone trying to wake up from a confusing dream. But you never said anything." 6 months. You've owned this place for 6 months and never mentioned it. Would you have believed me if I had?" The question hung in the air, because we all knew the answer. If I'd called Kyle 6 months ago and told him I'd just purchased a high-end restaurant in Carmel Valley, he'd have assumed I was joking or delusional. If I'd mentioned it to my mother, she'd have launched into a lecture about overextending myself financially and the dangers of the restaurant business. Amanda was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between awe and confusion. "But how did you, where did you get the money?" "From my businesses. The ones you all keep calling ventures and projects." I sat back down, feeling more composed now that the secret was out. Turns out they've been more successful than anyone realized. Vincent, bless him, chose that moment to provide some professional distance. I'll leave you all to enjoy your evening. Miss Chun, please let me know if you need anything. As he walked away, the bubble of privacy returned to our table, but everything inside it had changed. Jenna, my father said, his voice still filled with wonder, this is incredible. I'm so proud of you. But why didn't you tell us? This was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. How do you explain to your family that you stopped sharing your successes because they'd trained you to expect dismissal instead of support? Because telling you about my achievements hasn't exactly been met with enthusiasm in the past. My mother's face flushed. That's not fair, Jenna. We've always supported you. Have you? I kept my voice gentle, but the words had to be said. Mom, 2 hours ago you told me not to worry about contributing to Dad's birthday dinner because money was tight for me. You've spent years treating my businesses like hobbies, waiting for me to grow up and get a real job. But we didn't know, she protested. If you'd told us how successful you were, would it have mattered? Or would you have found reasons to explain it away? Lucky break, right place at the right time, unsustainable business model. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. These were exactly the explanations they would have used, the same pattern of dismissal they'd applied to every achievement I'd shared with them over the years. Kyle was looking around the dining room with new eyes, and I could see him doing calculations in his head. How much did this cost? The purchase, the renovation, all of it. More than your house, I said simply. He winced but pressed on. And you paid for it outright? No investors, no loans? Some financing for the renovation, but I put up 70% cash. 70% cash. I watched him try to process what that meant about my financial situation, about the gap between what he'd assumed about my life and what was actually true. Jesus Christ, Jenna. Do you know what Mom said to me last month? She was worried about you, thought maybe you needed money. She asked if I should offer to help with your rent. My mother looked mortified. Kyle, you don't need to. No, she should know this. We've been treating her like the family charity case while she was apparently building an empire. An empire? I liked the sound of that, even if it was an exaggeration. It's not an empire, I said, but it's successful. More successful than I ever thought possible when I was starting out. Amanda was still staring at the restaurant around us, as if seeing it for the first time. You own all of this. The building, the kitchen, the staff, everything. Everything you've experienced tonight. The service, the food, the wine selection, the atmosphere. It's all the result of decisions I made. Standards I set. My vision for what this place could become. It felt strange saying it out loud, claiming ownership of what they'd been praising all evening. For months, I'd been the anonymous benefactor, the invisible hand guiding their experience. Now I was stepping into the spotlight, acknowledging my role in creating the magic they'd been enjoying. My father reached across the table and took my hand. Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. I nodded. Are you happy? With all of this, with what you've built, are you happy? The question caught me off guard. In all my planning for this moment, I'd anticipated anger, embarrassment, disbelief, even resentment. But I hadn't expected him to ask about my happiness. I am, Dad. I really am. Then I'm proud of you. Not just for the success, but for finding your path and following it, even when we couldn't see where it was leading. My mother was still struggling with the revelation. But Jenna, why here? Why a restaurant? You've never shown any interest in food service. It's not about the restaurant business specifically. It's about seeing potential where others see problems. When I found this place, it was struggling. The previous owner couldn't make it profitable. But I saw what it could become with the right investment and management. Like your marketing agencies? Exactly like my marketing agencies. I find businesses that aren't reaching their potential. I provide the resources and strategy to transform them, and then I either improve their value or acquire them outright. Kyle was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, respect mixed with something that might have been intimidation. How many businesses do you own? Own outright? 3 agencies, this restaurant, 2 commercial properties in San Francisco, and a small tech startup that's developing marketing automation software. The numbers seemed to hit them like physical blows. This wasn't just success. This was wealth on a scale they'd never imagined possible for someone in our family. And you did all this while we were? My mother trailed off. While you were assuming I was struggling, yes. James chose that moment to approach our table, carrying a bottle I recognized as one of our most expensive champagnes. Compliments of the house, he said with a grin, clearly enjoying being part of the evening's drama. Ms. Chen thought you might want to continue the celebration. As he poured the champagne, my family watched the ritual with new understanding. The server wasn't just being generous with someone else's wine. He was following orders from his boss.
Me.
This is surreal, Amanda murmured. We've been sitting here all evening, impressed by the owner's generosity, and it was you the whole time. Did you plan this?
Kyle asked.
The whole evening, the reveal. Was it all orchestrated? I considered lying, making it seem like a happy coincidence. But the truth seemed more appropriate now. I planned it. When Mom called and told me not to worry about contributing to Dad's birthday dinner because I couldn't afford it, I decided it was time to show you exactly what I could afford. My mother's face went white.
Oh, Jenna. I'm so sorry.
I had no idea. You had no idea because you never asked. None of you ever asked about the details of my businesses, about my financial situation, about my plans, or my achievements. You made assumptions and then treated those assumptions as facts. The champagne bubbles rose in our glasses, but the celebration felt complicated now. This wasn't just a birthday dinner anymore. It was a reckoning with years of misunderstood relationships and missed connections. So what happens now? Kyle asked. Where do we go from here? It was a good question. I'd planned this moment meticulously, but I'd never really thought about what came after the revelation. How do you rebuild family relationships when the foundation has shifted so dramatically? Now we've finished Dad's birthday dinner, I said. And maybe if you're interested, you can start getting to know who I actually am instead of who you thought I was. My father raised his champagne glass. To Jenna, he said, his voice strong and clear. For surprising us all, and for showing us that sometimes the people we think we know best are capable of things we never imagined. As we clinked glasses, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly. Relief that the secret was finally out. But also sadness for all the years we'd wasted, all the conversations we'd never had because they couldn't see past their assumptions about me. The evening was far from over, but the dynamic at our table had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the struggling daughter they worried about. I was the successful entrepreneur they'd never bothered to notice. And that realization was going to have consequences none of us had fully anticipated. The champagne had been poured, the toast had been made, but the atmosphere at our table remained charged with unresolved tension. My family was still processing the revelation, and I could see different emotions playing across their faces as they tried to reconcile their assumptions with reality. My mother was the first to break the contemplative silence. Jenna, I need to understand something. If you've been this successful, why have you been living so modestly? I almost laughed. Modestly. My penthouse apartment in Pacific Heights with its view of the Golden Gate Bridge, my Tesla, my investment portfolio, apparently none of that had registered as signs of prosperity. But then again, they'd only seen glimpses of my life, carefully curated visits where I downplayed my success to avoid exactly the kind of reaction I was getting now. I live pretty well, actually. You've just never seen most of my life because I learned early on that sharing good news with this family wasn't always met with celebration. Kyle set down his champagne glass harder than necessary. That's not fair, Jenna. We would have been happy for you. Would you have? Or would you have found ways to minimize it, to explain it away, to warn me about how quickly success can disappear? The question hung in the air because we all knew the answer. My family's default response to my achievements had always been caution disguised as concern, skepticism masked as practical advice. When I sold my first agency for $1.2 million, I continued. I called Mom to share the news. Do you remember what you said? My mother's face went pale. Jenna, You said, and I quote, "That's nice, dear, but make sure you put most of it in savings. These kinds of windfalls don't last, and you'll need something to fall back on when the next venture doesn't work out." The memory was crystal clear because it had hurt so deeply. Instead of celebrating with me, instead of acknowledging what I'd accomplished, she'd immediately focused on the inevitable failure she assumed was coming. "I was trying to be practical," she said weakly. "You were being dismissive. There's a difference." Amanda was looking uncomfortable, clearly wishing she weren't witnessing this family confrontation. But Kyle seemed to be processing something deeper. "Wait," he said slowly. "If you sold your first agency for over $1 million, what happened to that money?" "I invested it. Used it to acquire my second agency, then my third. Built the portfolio I have now. So when I was telling you about my promotion, about my raise, about my plans to buy the bigger house..." He trailed off, the implications sinking in. "You were excited about making $70,000 a year, while I was generating 10 times that in quarterly profits, yes." The numbers seemed to physically impact him. He slumped back in his chair, staring at me as if I were a complete stranger. "Jesus, Jenna. Do you know how many times I've offered you financial advice? How many times I've explained investment strategies to you like you were a child?" "7 times in the past 2 years, I said. "I've been counting." My father was watching this exchange with growing discomfort. "Jenna, Kyle, maybe we should." "No, Dad, this needs to be said." I looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes. "For years, you've all treated me like the family failure. The irresponsible one. The dreamer who couldn't handle reality. Do you have any idea what that feels like when you're actually succeeding beyond your wildest dreams?" My mother was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide behind her napkin. "We never meant to make you feel like a failure. But you did. Every family gathering where Kyle's achievements were celebrated while mine were dismissed. Every conversation where you assumed I needed help, advice, or rescue. Every time you spoke about my businesses like they were hobbies I'd eventually outgrow." Vincent appeared tableside again, his impeccable timing suggesting he'd been monitoring our conversation from a professional distance. "Is everything satisfactory? Can I bring you anything?" "We're fine, Vincent. Thank you." But we weren't fine. We were a family confronting years of misunderstood dynamics and missed opportunities for real connection. After Vincent left, Kyle spoke up again, his voice quieter now. "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." I nodded. "Did you plan this whole thing to humiliate us? To make us look foolish?" The question stung because there was truth in it. Part of me had wanted them to feel foolish, to experience the embarrassment of having their assumptions proven wrong so dramatically. "I planned it to show you who I really am. If that feels humiliating, maybe that's because you should be embarrassed about how wrong you've been." "Jenna," my father said gently, "that's harsh." "Is it? Dad, when's the last time any of you asked me a real question about my work? Not advice, not warnings about the dangers of entrepreneurship, just genuine curiosity about what I do, how I do it, whether I'm proud of what I've built." The silence that followed was answer enough. "I thought so." Amanda finally spoke up, her voice tentative. "We didn't know how to talk to you about your work because it seemed so complicated. And risky. We were worried about you. Worried that I'd fail. Or worried that I'd succeed?" The question clearly caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, which would have been more comfortable for everyone? Me failing and needing your help, or me succeeding beyond anything you thought possible?" Another uncomfortable silence. My mother had stopped crying, but her voice was thick with emotion when she spoke. "Jenna, you're our daughter. We want you to be happy and successful. We always have. You want me to be successful in ways you can understand and control. Kyle's job at the bank makes sense to you. It's stable, predictable, measurable. My businesses are chaotic and unpredictable and scary, so you've spent years hoping I'd give them up for something more conventional." Kyle was nodding slowly. "You're right. I've been waiting for you to get a real job. This is my real job. This restaurant, my agencies, my investments, this is my career. This is what I do professionally, and I'm incredibly good at it. Apparently, he said, looking around the dining room with new respect. I mean, this place is... He gestured helplessly at the elegant surroundings, the satisfied diners, the seamless service. This is incredible, Jenna. What you've built here is incredible. It was the first time I could remember Kyle acknowledging one of my achievements without immediately following it with a warning or suggestion for improvement. Thank you. James returned to our table, his timing perfect as always. Can I offer you anything else this evening? Coffee? Dessert? Wine? Perhaps a tour of the facilities.
A tour.
The idea hadn't occurred to me, but suddenly I wanted them to see everything. The kitchen where Maria created her culinary art, the wine cellar I'd spent months curating, the private dining rooms I designed for special occasions. Actually, yes. I'd like to show my family around, if that's possible. Of course, Ms. Chun. Whenever you're ready. As James walked away, I looked at my family, really looked at them, for the first time all evening. My father, still processing his pride and amazement. My mother, struggling with guilt and regret. Kyle, recalibrating his entire understanding of who his sister was. Amanda, overwhelmed by the dramatic shift in family dynamics. Come on, I said, standing up from the table. Let me show you what I've really been doing with my life. The tour would be the final piece of the evening's revelation, the chance for them to see not just the results of my success, but the thought, planning, and vision that had created it. As we prepared to leave our table, my father caught my arm gently. Jenna, I need you to know something. I waited. I've always been proud of you. Even when I didn't understand what you were doing, even when I worried about your choices, I've always been proud of your courage, your determination, your refusal to settle for ordinary. I should have said that more often. His words hit me harder than any revelation of the evening. All the planning, all the orchestration, all the dramatic timing, none of it mattered as much as hearing my father say he was proud of me. Thanks, Dad. That means everything. But even as I savored the moment, I knew the evening wasn't over. The tour would complete their education about my success, but it would also force them to confront just how much of my life they'd missed, how much they'd misunderstood about who I'd become. The reckoning was far from finished. Leading my family through Rosewood Manor felt like revealing layers of a secret I'd been keeping for months. As we moved from the dining room toward the kitchen, I watched them see the restaurant with completely new eyes, not as guests experiencing someone else's hospitality, but as family members discovering what their daughter and sister had built. The renovation took 4 months, I explained as we walked past the bar area. The previous owner had let everything deteriorate. The kitchen equipment was ancient, the dining room furniture was mismatched, and the wine program was basically non-existent. My mother ran her hand along the polished mahogany bar, her fingers tracing the smooth wood grain. You chose all of this? Every detail. The wood, the lighting, the layout, all of it. I gestured toward the dining room we'd just left. Those tables? I found them at an estate sale in Napa. The chairs were custom-made by a craftsman in Santa Barbara. The lighting fixtures are from a company in Italy that specializes in restaurant design. Kyle was staring at the bar's extensive wine display. How much did all this cost? More than your annual salary, I said, then immediately regretted the comparison.
Sorry.
That was unnecessary. No, it wasn't, he said quietly. I keep asking about money because I'm trying to understand the scale of what you've accomplished. This isn't just successful. This is wealth on a level I never imagined possible. We reached the kitchen, where Maria was supervising the final preparations for the evening's remaining guests. She looked up as we entered, her face breaking into a warm smile. Miss Chun, how did your family enjoy the tasting menu? They loved it, Maria. Thank you for making it perfect. I turned to my family. This is Maria Santos, our head chef. She's been here for 8 years and is the real genius behind tonight's incredible food. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and extended one to my father. Mr. Peterson, happy birthday. I hope this was a memorable evening for you. Unforgettable, he said warmly. That duck was the best I've ever tasted. Maria, I said, would you mind showing them around the kitchen? I'd like them to see what we've built here. For the next 10 minutes, Maria led us through the heart of the restaurant's operations. She showed them the new commercial-grade ovens I'd installed, the walk-in refrigeration system, the specialized equipment that allowed her to create restaurant-quality presentations. More importantly, she talked about the freedom I'd given her to elevate the cuisine, the budget for premium ingredients, the support for her creative vision. Before Ms. Chin bought this place, Maria explained, we were always cutting corners, always looking for cheaper ingredients, always worried about whether we could afford to try new dishes. Now I can focus on creating the best possible food without constantly worrying about costs. I could see my family processing this information, understanding that my ownership wasn't just about financial success. It was about creating an environment where talented people could do their best work. From the kitchen, we moved to the wine cellar, a temperature-controlled room I'd had specially constructed during the renovation. The walls were lined with carefully curated bottles, organized by region and vintage. Holy shit, Kyle whispered, then immediately looked around to make sure no staff had heard him. Jenna, some of these bottles cost more than my car payment. He wasn't wrong. The wine program had been one of my biggest investments, partly because I wanted Rosewood Manor to compete with the best restaurants in California, but also because I'd fallen in love with the process of building a collection. Each bottle represented a decision, a bet on quality and potential value. This is a 1995 Opus 1, I said, pointing to one section. I bought a case at auction last year. And over here are some local Pinot Noirs from small producers that most people have never heard of, but that I think will be legendary in 10 years. My father was examining the labels with the fascination of someone who'd always appreciated quality, but never had access to it at this level. How do you know which wines to choose? Research, tasting, instinct. It's not that different from any other investment decision. You study the market, understand the trends, and make educated bets on what will hold value. Amanda was taking photos with her phone, clearly overwhelmed by the scope of what she was seeing. Jenna, this is like something you'd see on a TV show about rich people's houses. Rich people's houses. I suppose that's what this was in a way. The tangible evidence that I'd crossed into a socioeconomic category my family had never imagined I could reach. Our final stop was the private dining room, an intimate space I designed for special occasions and business meetings. It featured a single large table that could seat 12, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. I host client dinners here sometimes, I explained. And I'm thinking about using it for special events, wine tastings, chef's table experiences, that kind of thing. Kyle walked to the windows, looking out at the view as the sun set over the hills. This is incredible, Jenna. I mean, this whole place is incredible. But I have to ask, what? Why didn't you tell us? Not the dramatic reveal, but before tonight. Why didn't you share any of this with us? It was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating all evening. Because I was tired of having my successes dismissed or explained away. Because every time I tried to share good news with this family, someone found a way to minimize it or warn me about potential problems. Because I learned that it was easier to keep my achievements to myself than to fight for recognition I wasn't going to get anyway. My mother was looking at her reflection in the dark windows, her expression troubled. We failed you, didn't we? You didn't fail me, I said carefully. But you never really saw me. You saw the person you expected me to be, struggling, irresponsible, in need of guidance, and you never looked closely enough to notice that person didn't exist anymore. When did it change? My father asked. When did you stop being the daughter who needed our help and become this? It was a fair question, and one I'd asked myself many times. It wasn't a single moment, I said, settling into one of the private dining room's chairs. It was gradual. But if I had to pick a turning point, it was probably 3 years ago when my second agency landed the Morrison Tech account. They all looked blank. Of course they wouldn't remember. Morrison Tech was a startup that needed a complete brand overhaul and marketing strategy. The contract was worth $800K over 2 years. When I called to tell you about it, Mom, You said it sounded risky working with such a young company, and Kyle suggested I should have negotiated for payment up front because startups fail all the time. The memory was sharp and painful, even now. Morrison Tech went public 18 months later. My marketing strategy was a key factor in their IPO success. They gave me a bonus of $300K and referred me to 6 other companies. That contract launched my entire portfolio of clients. Kyle was staring at the table. I remember that conversation. I thought I was being helpful. You were being you. You were applying your banking mindset to my business, assuming that because I was taking risks you wouldn't take, I was being reckless instead of strategic. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of missed connections hanging heavy in the room. Amanda spoke up tentatively. So, when you bought this place, you didn't need loans or investors? I paid cash for the property and financed the renovation through my business credit lines. The whole transaction took about 6 weeks from initial offer to closing. 6 weeks, my mother repeated. People spend longer shopping for cars. When you have the resources and you see the right opportunity, you move quickly. This place was undervalued because the previous owner couldn't make it profitable, but I could see what it could become with proper investment and management. My father was looking around the private dining room with new understanding. And you did all the planning yourself? The design, the renovation, the hiring? I hired professionals for the technical work, architects, contractors, consultants. But the vision was mine. Every decision about what this place should feel like, what kind of experience we should create, that all came from me. As we prepared to leave the private dining room, Kyle stopped me. Jenna, I need to apologize. Kyle, you don't. Yes, I do. I've been condescending to you for years, treating you like my irresponsible older sister who needed my advice and guidance. And the whole time, you were building something I couldn't even comprehend. His admission was more painful than satisfying. I'd wanted acknowledgement, but I hadn't realized how much his dismissal had actually hurt until he was apologizing for it. I've been jealous, he continued. Even when I thought you were struggling, I was jealous of your courage, your willingness to take risks. I chose the safe path, stable job, predictable income, conventional success. You chose the scary path and created something extraordinary. Your path isn't wrong, Kyle. It's just different. But you're right about how we treated your achievements. We should have celebrated them instead of finding reasons to worry about them. As we walked back through the restaurant toward our table, I found myself seeing the evening differently. The revelation had accomplished what I'd intended. My family now understood my success and could no longer dismiss my achievements. But it had also created a new dynamic that felt complicated and fragile. Vincent met us at our table, where our personal belongings waited. I hope you enjoyed the tour, everyone. Ms. Chen has created something truly special here. She certainly has, my father said, his pride evident in his voice. Vincent, thank you for helping make this such a memorable evening. My pleasure entirely. And Mr. Peterson, I hope this birthday dinner exceeded your expectations. As Vincent walked away, I realized we'd reached the end of the evening's orchestrated drama. The secret was out, the tour was complete, and we were back to being a family trying to figure out how to relate to each other with new information. So, what happens now? Amanda asked, voicing what we were all thinking. Now we go home, I said. And maybe we start having different kinds of conversations. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Jenna, I want you to know how sorry I am. Not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing you clearly. You're remarkable, and I should have recognized that sooner. Her apology meant more to me than the restaurant, more than the financial success, more than any of the evening's revelations. Thanks, Mom. That means everything. Kyle was gathering his jacket, but he paused. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
What's next for you? I mean, with all this success, what's the next goal? It was a good question. For years, I'd been driven partly by the desire to prove myself to them. Now that I had, I wasn't entirely sure what came next. I'm thinking about expanding. Maybe acquiring another restaurant, or investing in the tech startup I mentioned earlier. There are always opportunities if you know how to recognize them. And you'll tell us about them? my father asked. Not the dramatic reveal version, just, tell us what you're working on. If you're genuinely interested, yes. We're interested, my mother said firmly. We want to be part of your life, the real version of your life. As we prepared to leave Rosewood Manor, James appeared with a final surprise, a bottle of champagne for my father to take home. Happy birthday, Mr. Peterson. Compliments of Ms. Chun. My father accepted the bottle with a smile that reached his eyes. Thank you, James. And please tell Ms. Chun this was the best birthday celebration I've ever had. I'll be sure to pass that along, James said with a grin, clearly enjoying his role in the evening's drama. Outside in the parking area, as we prepared to go our separate ways, Cal pulled me aside. Jenna, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Okay. Are we going to be okay? Our relationship, I mean. After tonight, after everything that's been said, can we move past this? I considered the question. The evening had been cathartic, but also painful. Years of misunderstood dynamics don't disappear with a single conversation. I think so, I said. But it's going to require all of us being more honest about who we actually are instead of who we assume each other to be. I'd like that, he said. I'd like to get to know my successful, badass entrepreneur sister. And I'd like to get to know my brother without having to prove myself to him every time we talk. As I drove home through the Carmel Valley darkness, my phone buzzing with text messages from family members still processing the evening, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the secret was finally out. Satisfaction that I'd proven my worth so dramatically. But also a strange sadness for all the years we'd spent not really knowing each other. The revelation had been everything I'd planned, and more than I'd expected. But like most revenge, it was more complicated in reality than it had been in fantasy. Still, as I pulled into my own driveway and looked up at my house, my paid-for house with its view of the bay, I felt proud of what I'd accomplished. Not just the financial success, but the courage to build something meaningful despite the lack of support from the people whose opinions had mattered most to me. Tomorrow, I'd call my father and thank him for the pride in his voice when he'd introduce me to other diners as my daughter, the restaurant owner. I'd have coffee with my mother and listen to her process her regrets about years of misunderstanding. I'd probably get a long email from Kyle asking for advice about his own career aspirations. But tonight, I was going to pour myself a glass of wine from my own collection and savor the memory of their faces when they realized their struggling daughter owned the very place they'd thought was too expensive for her to afford. It had been a perfect evening of revelation and reckoning. And I was just getting started. 3 days after the dinner that changed everything, I was sitting in my office overlooking San Francisco Bay when my assistant buzzed in. Jenna, your mother is here to see you. My mother. At my office. In all the years I'd been running my agencies, she'd never once visited my workplace. She'd never asked to see where I worked, never expressed curiosity about my professional environment. But apparently, revelations had a way of generating curiosity. Send her in, Sarah. When my mother walked through the door, I could see her taking in every detail of my corner office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the awards displayed on the walls, the view that screamed success. This was another layer of my life she'd never seen, another piece of evidence that the daughter she thought she knew had been living a completely different reality. Jenna, this is... She trailed off, walking to the windows that showcased the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Not what you expected? I don't know what I expected. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of wonder and regret. I realized driving over here that I've never actually seen where you work. In all these years, I've never asked to visit your office. She was right. Kyle had given us all tours of his bank branch, proudly showing off his desk and introducing us to his colleagues. Amanda had invited the family to her workplace holiday parties. But no one had ever asked to see my professional world, and I'd stopped inviting them after my early attempts were met with polite disinterest. Would you like some coffee? I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but we can talk. As I poured coffee from the machine I'd installed for client meetings, my mother settled into one of the leather chairs facing my desk. I've been thinking about Tuesday night constantly, she said. About all the things I said, all the assumptions I made. Mom, we talked about this at the restaurant.
No, let me finish.
I need to say this. She took a deep breath. I called Kyle yesterday to talk through what happened, and he helped me understand something I hadn't realized. I waited. You've been successful for years. Not just with the restaurant, but with everything. This office, your agencies, your whole professional life. You built all of this while we were treating you like you couldn't manage your own finances. The admission hung in the air between us. The thing is, she continued, I think part of me knew. The clothes you wore, the car you drove, the way you carried yourself. There were signs that you were doing well. But I chose not to see them because it was easier to maintain my image of you as the daughter who needed guidance. Her honesty was more painful than any accusation would have been. Why was that easier? I asked. Because if you were successful, really successful, then I had to confront the fact that I'd been wrong about your choices. Your decision to drop out of school, to start businesses instead of getting a traditional job, to take risks instead of playing it safe. If you were right about all that, then my advice had been not just unhelpful, but actually counterproductive. She was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't try to hide.
I'm so sorry, Jenna.
I'm sorry for dismissing your achievements, for treating your successes like luck instead of skill, for making you feel like you had to prove yourself with such a dramatic gesture. Mom, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of your courage, your vision, your refusal to settle for the conventional path. You built something extraordinary, and you did it despite having a family that couldn't see what you were accomplishing. Her apology was everything I'd wanted, and more than I'd expected. But it also highlighted something I'd been avoiding thinking about. The cost of keeping my success secret, the emotional toll of feeling invisible to the people I loved most. Thank you for saying that. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? Really happy? Or have you been so focused on proving us wrong that you forgot to enjoy what you were building? The question caught me completely off guard. In all my planning for career success, in all my focus on financial achievement and business growth, I'd rarely stop to consider whether I was actually happy. I think so. I love my work. I'm proud of what I've built. But you're not wrong about the proving you wrong part. A lot of my drive has been about showing you all that I could succeed. That's not a healthy foundation for a life, sweetheart. She was right. How much of my success had been genuine passion, and how much had been an elaborate attempt to earn recognition from a family that had trained me to expect dismissal. I want to try again, she said. With us. With our relationship. I want to know about your actual life, not the version you've been showing us to avoid conflict. What does that look like? It looks like me asking about your work because I'm genuinely curious, not because I'm looking for problems to worry about. It looks like celebrating your achievements instead of immediately focusing on potential risks. It looks like treating you like the competent adult you clearly are instead of the struggling child I've been imagining. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about her question. Was I happy? The honest answer was complicated. I was proud of my achievements, fulfilled by my work, excited about future opportunities. But I was also realizing how much energy I'd spent on resentment, how much of my success had been motivated by a need to prove rather than a desire to create. The restaurant revelation had accomplished its goal, but it had also forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my own motivations. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Can we have lunch this week? I want to pick your brain about a business idea I've been thinking about. A business idea. Kyle, Mr. Conventional Career Path, was apparently inspired enough by my success to consider entrepreneurial ventures of his own. I texted back. Thursday at 1? I know a great place in the financial district. His response came immediately. Perfect.
And Jenna?
Thanks for showing us who you really are. Even if it took a dramatic restaurant reveal to do it. That evening, I drove back to Rosewood Manor for the first time since the birthday dinner. Vincent greeted me with his usual warmth, but there was something different in his manner, a knowing smile that suggested he'd enjoyed his role in the family drama. Miss Chun, how are you feeling after your big reveal? Complicated, I admitted. But good. I think it was time. Family relationships are never simple, he said sagely. But honesty usually improves them, even when it's uncomfortable. I took my usual table in the corner, not the vineyard table where we'd staged Tuesday night's revelation, and ordered a simple dinner. As I ate, I watched other families enjoying their meals, other celebrations unfolding, other relationships playing out in real time. How many of them were struggling with the same kind of misunderstandings my family had been navigating for years? How many successful people were hiding their achievements to avoid complicated family dynamics? How many parents were unknowingly dismissing their children's accomplishments because those accomplishments didn't fit their expectations? Maria appeared tableside as I finished my meal. "Miss Chun, how is everything?" "Perfect as always." "Maria, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you realized I was the owner, when Vincent introduced me that night, were you surprised?" She considered the question carefully. "Surprised by the family drama?"
Yes.
"Surprised that you were capable of orchestrating something so elaborate?" "Not at all. You've been planning and executing complex strategies since the day you bought this place. Tuesday night was just another example of your strategic thinking." Her perspective was illuminating. To Maria, my restaurant revelation hadn't been revenge or drama, it had been strategy. Another example of seeing opportunity and executing a plan to achieve a specific outcome. Maybe that's what successful people did. They identified what they wanted to accomplish and then figured out how to make it happen, whether it was revitalizing a struggling restaurant or reshaping family relationships that had grown stale and limiting. As I prepared to leave, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Dad." "Jenna, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all. I'm just finishing dinner at the restaurant." Checking on your investment?" "Something like that." "I wanted to call because I've been thinking about Tuesday night, about everything that happened." I braced myself for another emotional conversation. "I'm not calling to apologize. Your mother already covered that ground pretty thoroughly, I'm sure. I'm calling because I realized I never asked you the most important question." "What's that?" "What's next? You've built this incredible portfolio of businesses. You've shown us all that our assumptions about you are completely wrong. So, what's the next mountain you're planning to climb?" The question made me smile. This was exactly the kind of conversation I'd been hoping to have with my family for years. Not about my past mistakes or potential future problems, but about my actual ambitions and plans. I'm thinking about expanding into hospitality more broadly, maybe acquiring a small hotel or developing a restaurant group. There are opportunities in the market right now for someone with the right vision and resources. That sounds exciting. And risky. Most worthwhile things are. True enough. Jenna, can I tell you something? Of course. I've always been proud of you, but Tuesday night I realized I'd been proud of you for the wrong reasons. I was proud of your resilience, your determination to keep trying despite setbacks. But I should have been proud of your success, your vision, your ability to see opportunities others miss. Dad. Let me finish. You didn't need to stage such an elaborate reveal to get my attention or approval. You had both already, I just hadn't been expressing them properly. But I'm glad you did it anyway, because it forced all of us to see you clearly instead of through our outdated assumptions. After we hung up, I sat in my car in Rosewood Manor's parking lot, processing the conversation. The revenge I'd planned had accomplished more than I'd intended. It hadn't just proven my success to my family, it had forced all of us to re-examine our relationships and communication patterns. But more than that, it had forced me to examine my own motivations and consider what I actually wanted from life beyond proving my worth to people who should have recognized it already. As I drove home through the California evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd gotten revenge on my family, but because I no longer needed it. The secret was out, the relationships were healing, and I was free to pursue success for my own satisfaction rather than to prove a point to anyone else. That freedom, I realized, was worth more than any restaurant reveal could ever be. 6 months after the birthday dinner that changed everything, I was standing in the construction zone that would become my second restaurant when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Kyle's name, and I smiled as I answered. "Hey, little brother. How's the business plan coming along?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I finished the financial projections for the consulting firm, and I was wondering if you'd have time to look them over? Maybe give me some advice. The Kyle who'd once lectured me about fiscal responsibility was now asking for my business advice. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Send it over. I'll review it tonight, and we can discuss it over lunch tomorrow.
Thanks, Jenna.
And hey, congratulations on the new restaurant. Dad showed me the photos from your groundbreaking ceremony. It looks incredible. The groundbreaking ceremony. 6 months ago, my family hadn't even known I owned one restaurant. Now they were attending ribbon cuttings and celebrating my expansion plans. The transformation in our relationships had been as dramatic as any business success I'd achieved. After we hung up, I continued my walk through the construction site, reviewing plans with my contractor and making decisions about fixtures and finishes. This second location was bigger than Rosewood Manor, more ambitious in scope, designed to establish me as a serious player in the California hospitality scene. But unlike my first restaurant purchase, this expansion wasn't motivated by a need to prove anything to my family. They already understood my capabilities, already recognized my success. This was purely about my own vision for growth and the opportunities one could see in the market. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Saw the article about you in SF Business Journal. So proud to be your sister-in-law. Can't wait for the new restaurant opening. The SF Business Journal article. They'd featured me in their Entrepreneurs to Watch section, highlighting my restaurant acquisitions and discussing my plans for expansion. When the journalist had asked about my family's reaction to my success, I'd been able to answer honestly that they were my biggest supporters. It had taken a dramatic revelation to get there, but we'd arrived at something that felt genuine and sustainable. Vincent appeared beside me, clipboard in hand, reviewing the timeline for our grand opening. Miss Chun, the kitchen equipment should be installed next week, and Maria has finalized the menu for both locations. We're on track for a soft opening in 6 weeks. Perfect. And Vincent? Thank you for everything you've done to make this expansion possible. Your expertise has been invaluable. It's been my pleasure. When you saved Rosewood Manor, you gave me the opportunity to be part of something special. Now we're building something even more ambitious. As we discussed operational details, I found myself thinking about that first phone call from my mother 6 months ago, the one that had triggered the elaborate birthday dinner revelation. At the time, her assumption that I couldn't afford to contribute to my father's celebration had felt like the final insult in years of dismissive treatment. But looking back, I realized that call had been a gift. It had forced me to stop hiding my success, to stop protecting my family from the reality of what I'd accomplished. The confrontation that followed had been painful but necessary, clearing the air of years of misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. My mother had become one of my most enthusiastic supporters, regularly sharing articles about my business success with her friends and asking detailed questions about my expansion plans. She'd even joined the advisory board for a women's entrepreneurship group, using her experience with me to help other mothers better support their ambitious daughters. Kyle had surprised everyone by giving notice at the bank and launching his own financial consulting practice, inspired partly by watching me build multiple successful businesses. His first client was a restaurant owner who needed help with expansion financing, a referral I'd been happy to provide. My father had started introducing me to his golf buddies as my daughter, the restaurant mogul, with a pride that was both embarrassing and deeply satisfying. But perhaps most importantly, I discovered something about myself in the aftermath of that dramatic evening. Success was more enjoyable when it was shared with people who could appreciate it. Hiding my achievements had protected me from dismissal, but it had also deprived me of the joy that comes from having your accomplishments recognized and celebrated by the people you love. Miss Chun. Vincent was looking at me with concern. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect, I said and meant it. As I prepared to leave the construction site, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. Jenna, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Never, Dad. What's up? I wanted to let you know that your mother and I would like to host a family dinner this Sunday. Nothing dramatic, he added with a chuckle. Just a regular family meal where we can catch up on everyone's lives. A regular family meal. The phrase would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, when our gatherings were marked by careful topic avoidance and unspoken tensions. Now it sounded like exactly what I wanted. I'll be there. Should I bring wine? Only if you want to show off your excellent taste, he said with obvious affection.
Dad.
Yes, thank you. For everything that's happened since that birthday dinner. For being open to seeing me differently, for supporting my dreams even when you didn't understand them. Thank you for being patient with us while we figured out how to be better family to each other. After we hung up, I stood outside my future restaurant, looking at the bustling construction activity that represented my expanding vision. In a few months, this space would be filled with diners enjoying exceptional food, celebrating special occasions, creating memories. Like Rosewood Manor, it would be a place where excellence was the standard and hospitality was an art form. But unlike my first restaurant purchase, this expansion felt purely positive. There was no hidden agenda, no family dynamics to navigate, no need to prove anything beyond my own ability to recognize and capitalize on opportunities. I'd moved beyond revenge into something more sustainable. Authentic success built on genuine passion and supported by relationships based on truth rather than assumptions. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day from Maria. Miss Chun, I've been thinking about names for the new restaurant. What do you think of legacy? It feels like what we're building together, something that will last, something that will matter. Legacy. I like the sound of that. It suggested not just success, but success with meaning, achievement that would outlast the quarterly reports and profit margins. As I drove home through the evening traffic, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the struggling entrepreneur my family couldn't see, to the successful businesswoman staging elaborate revelations, to someone who no longer needed external validation to feel proud of her accomplishments. The birthday dinner reveal had been satisfying, but it had also been the last time I'd needed to prove myself to anyone. Now I was free to build purely for the joy of creation, to succeed for the satisfaction of achievement, to take risks because the opportunities excited me rather than because I needed to demonstrate my capabilities. 6 months ago, I'd owned a secret restaurant and a family that didn't understand me. Now I was expanding my hospitality empire with the full support of people who knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of achieving. If you've ever felt invisible to the people whose opinions matter most to you, I want you to know that recognition is possible. Sometimes it comes gradually, through patient demonstration of your worth. Sometimes it requires dramatic gestures and uncomfortable conversations. But however it happens, the moment when people finally see you clearly, really see you, is worth every struggle it took to get there. And what comes after that moment? The freedom to be genuinely yourself, to pursue authentic goals, to build relationships based on truth rather than misunderstanding. That freedom is the real success, more valuable than any restaurant or portfolio or business achievement. That freedom is what makes everything else meaningful. As I pulled into my driveway and looked up at my house, my home, my sanctuary, my reward for years of work and vision and persistence, I felt grateful not just for the financial success I'd achieved, but for the family relationships I'd fought to repair and the self-knowledge I'd gained in the process. Tomorrow I'd review Kyle's business plan, finalize details for the new restaurant opening, and continue building the life I'd envisioned for myself. But tonight, I was going to pour myself a glass of wine from my own collection and savor the memory of my father's pride, my mother's apology, and my brother's newfound respect. The girl they'd once worried about had become a woman they could celebrate. And that transformation, theirs and mine, was sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. The story doesn't end with the revelation. It begins there, with a possibility of authentic relationships built on genuine understanding rather than outdated assumptions. And that beginning? That's where the real magic happens. Final CTA. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or invisible to the people who matter most, I want to hear from you in the comments. Share your own story of proving people wrong, or let me know how you're working to build something meaningful despite the doubts of others. And if you enjoyed this journey of family dynamics, business success, and personal growth, make sure to subscribe for more stories about the moments that change everything. Your support means the world to me, and it helps ensure I can keep sharing these real, raw, authentic experiences that remind us we're not alone in our struggles or our triumphs. Asterisk.